out. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All-powerful God, we ask during this first week of Advent that our strength of will for doing good is increased. May Christ find an eager welcome at his coming and call us to his side in the kingdom of heaven, where he lives now and forever, reigning with you, Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. So as I'm introducing Everett, if you hear dings, one of the team members will be letting other folks into the meeting. So hopefully our community here will be expanding as we continue through the evening. So I just want to introduce Everett Fritz. Everett is the founder and director of Andrew Missionaries, located in Denver now. But that's where he does a lot of his work. He also is he also works at a parish, and I forgot which parish you work at, Everett, but that's more recent. But we met Everett after reading his book, The Art of Forming Young Disciples. And he was visiting actually Clarion in Immaculate Conception in our diocese. And we heard him, Jillian was there and heard him. And when we started embarking on this work of our faith formation rollout 6 through 12, we thought, gosh, he could really give us a lot of help in what we're doing in terms of relational ministry, and more importantly, in small groups, especially when we get out of the more formal structure thing of edge and purpose, and we're going into small groups. We just thought that we could really use Everett's expertise. So he's really worked with our team and our diocese for the past 2 years, really, longer if you count the times that he came to speak. And so he is I call him an expert. He might disagree with me, but an expert in looking at small groups and how to form small groups and how small groups can be successful. And we know that we are now venturing into that area in our diocese as we are walking through Purpose now, which is the confirmation year. We'll be going into small groups, especially 10th grade year, but also at the end of the confirmation year. So we've asked him to do a little bit of webinar tonight, answering some questions, hearing some stories, and giving us a little shot on an arm on how we can do our small groups here. So I'm going to turn it over to Everett for him to tell us a little bit about what he's found in his work and what has worked, maybe what has not worked, and then we'll open it up for questions after that. So Everett, take it away.
Thanks, Deacon Steve. I just been so edified to work with your team over the course of the last 2 years. I laugh that you called me an expert because the definition of an expert is anybody who's 15 miles outside of town with a PowerPoint presentation. So, but my passion is youth ministry. I've been working with young people for well over 17 years, and in particular made a shift towards small group discipleship about 12 years ago, and saw tremendous results in terms of working with young people. I was given a presentation in California a couple of summers ago, and right before the presentation, an archbishop retweeted. I basically, sent out the standard social media, hey, if you're at this conference, come to my session. And then I woke up the next morning and my Twitter had just blown up. And it's because the archbishop had taken the topic of the presentation, which is why are young people leaving the church? And he said, hey, people should go to this. And next thing I knew, my Twitter was full of just like a ton of messages of people giving their opinion on why they thought young people were leaving the church. And it was comical if it wasn't so sad, because you had all kinds of ranges of opinions, but it's fascinating to me how seldom people actually get the answer to that question right. Because the reality is there's all kinds of reasons why people leave. You can't pinpoint and say this one reason. It's because of the liturgy, or it's because of the scandals, or it's because of poor catechesis. All of those things are contributing factors. Um, I actually had a good time at that conference. I read off to the audience some of the absurd things that people were saying, including blaming the people in the audience. I was like, "Did you know you guys are the ones responsible for the reason why young people are leaving the church?" But the way that I would summarize it, if I had to summarize the answer to that question in one sentence, is that young people leave the church because their needs are not met. The definition of ministry is meeting the needs of a person, and in fact, I like my I have a huge heart and I feel like it's almost scandalous thing to say these days, but I firmly agree with Pope Francis's direction for the church. I think synodality, which the definition of synodality is to journey with someone, is actually like spot on with what is missing in the church today. It's not poor teaching anymore. I think that that was a problem in post Vatican II, and obviously, quality catechesis is important. But if you listen to the testimonies of people who have left the church, seldom is it simply a question of poor catechesis. And in a lot of cases, it's more of along the lines of failing to feel welcomed, failing to feel heard and noticed, failing to be understood as a person. And those kinds of things are foundational. If you fail to meet the needs of people, what ends up happening is that they don't move to a point of self-actualization. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically the idea is that if you were stranded on a deserted island, your instinct is to have your basic needs met first, meaning food, water, fire, shelter. That's what you try to find first. And then once those basic needs are met, then you move to a point of self-actualization, which is that, in that case, to get off the island. We want young people who are being formed in the faith to get to a point of self-actualization step up. This is my faith. This is what I believe. It's not what my catechist or my pastor or my parents believe, but rather it's my faith now. And they're not getting to that step. And this is something that Pope Francis has repeated time and time again about youth ministry. He says, young people in today's method and formation fail to have their needs met. And because of that, they're walking away from the church. And so he says what needs to happen is that basically the structures that we use in ministry have failed young people. Young people have changed and the structures have not. I frequently will ask people about what time period do you think CCD started? CCD stands for Confraternity of Christian Doctrine. It's a catechetical method of instructing people in the faith. And the most common answer that I get is it probably started what, 1950s, 1940s, and I said it started in 1562 is when CCD was established, meaning roughly 450 years ago. I think young people and the world have changed considerably in the last 450 years. It really is true they've changed in the last 5 years. What's interesting statistically is if like the stats actually back this up. Um, we know that the church did a synod on young people not that long ago, and if you haven't read Christus Vivit, which is the document that came out of it in terms of Pope Francis's report on the state of young people, I highly recommend it. He talks at length about journeying with young people when it comes down to doing youth ministry, to meet them where they are, to truly meet their needs, to get to know them, to walk with them even in their own sinfulness. Um, and then um, it talks about how the structure of ministry needs to change. The national dialogue, there was a national dialogue on young people in the church today in the United States. So if you're not familiar with this, the USCCB and the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry, NFCYM, did a joint venture where they had conversations with over 10,000 young people in the United States. They met with people who had left the church, who were active in the church, who were atheists or just never churchgoers. They had, a variety of people that they met with. And when it came down to young people who had left the church, I highlighted this. I think it's on page 83 of the report. Don't quote me on that. It might be like 79, but somewhere in that vicinity. And in it, they said we were really surprised at how well catechized the young people were who had left the church. Like they assumed that the reason why one of the contributing factors for why they left the church was that they didn't understand church teaching, or they had a poor knowledge of the Catholic faith. And they said we were actually really surprised that the vast majority of young people that we spoke with could articulate the teachings of the faith. Now, whether or not they believed him was a different story. That ran all over the place in terms of the spectrum. But what they consistently heard from young people was this idea that they felt like there was more to be said, that they wished that there was dialogue when it came to understanding the teachings of the faith, and most importantly, they felt that the teachings that they were being taught were not shown to them, meaning there was poor witness, poor testimony. They basically called the church hypocrites. But that idea of being shown the faith, of actually witnessing the faith, of seeing it lived, is exceptionally important and what I would call a missing component of formation with young people. Um, in the time of Jesus, the method of formation that he entered into with his apostles was known as discipleship. And discipleship, which is a hot buzzword in the church right now and is constantly misused, it refers to a system of formation where a rabbi would invite a small number of people to come live with him and learn from his way of life. So the idea was not that they were learning from the rabbi's instruction. It was that the idea was that they were learning from observing the way in which he lived his life, the way he taught, the way he dealt with difficult people, and so on and so forth. And so the apostles got immersed in this method of formation because they were his handpicked small number of people, and they lived with him for 3 years. And that's extremely important to understand because this is actually the way that they planted the church when they went out into the places of Samaria and then eventually into modern day Turkey, like Corinth and Ephesus and Rome and so on and so forth. They didn't go and preach the gospel in the temple for a couple of weeks and then leave. They went and actually lived among the people. And the people, the early church, the Christians, learned from their way of life, which they had learned from Jesus. And so the idea was more that the faith was passed down by observation more than it was by instruction. Like, this is actually really important to understand because, like, if you look at the way who God is as a person, who he is as a being, like, God is a communion of persons. He is three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God is love. He's the love between the three persons and the person of the Holy Spirit. And so our faith is meant to be lived in community. It is meant to be seen and witnessed. I have a friend who challenges me constantly in terms of my understanding of the faith, and I love it. But she is frequently says a Christian without another Christian is not a Christian. Meaning that, like, Christians must live in community, and the idea behind living in community is that you learn from one another, you learn to love one another, you live the faith. What young people were saying in these national dialogues and these conversations is that they weren't seeing the faith lived. And that's a huge, very important missing component. I advocate for small group ministry. As Deacon Steve mentioned, I'll just say a couple of minutes on small group ministry and why it's important. There is nothing magical about small groups. Small groups is nothing new in Christian church and method. It just so happens to be an environment where young people can be known, they can be understood, they can't hide among the masses, they can't. They can actually have dialogue and conversation. They can receive guidance. Like, safe environment. It's an environment where they can be safe, understood, belong, create relationships, community. Like, now that just putting people in small groups and saying, now, learn the faith, that doesn't translate to discipleship. But a small group is a place where discipleship can happen. And this is the difference between just working in small group ministry for 12 years. The difference between success and failure is whether or not the people who are running the small groups truly grasp this idea of showing young people what the faith looks like, how to pray, not just talking about prayer. Serving together, doing community events together, having fellowship together, building friendships together, having dialogue and discussion and struggling and letting them ask tough questions about the faith and wrestling with the answers. This is the kind of ministry that I teach and have taught for the last 12 years. To give you an idea of I made a shift in the way I do youth ministry about 12 years ago, and we started to experiment with this idea of taking a couple of adult mentors, putting them in a small group with 5 or 6 young people, and letting them walk with those young people for several years. with the idea of them providing mentorship. These small groups would meet on their own. They'd meet in coffee shops. They'd meet in homes if it was allowed, diocesan wise. They would meet, in parks, whatever. And the idea is that build close, tight knit friendships. Um, I observed a high percentage of young people coming out of those small groups, having been in them for several years, still remaining in their Catholic faith. But I was guessing on the percentage. I actually have a Catholic high school in Iowa that has built over 100 small groups at this point and had hundreds and hundreds of teams within those small groups. And they did a study to follow those students that came out of small groups in college. They found that after the first year of college, if they weren't in a small group, receiving this ongoing mentorship, over half of them left the church within the first year of college. But those who were in a small group in high school, receiving intentional mentorship, discipleship, living the faith and seeing what it looked like, 95% were still active Catholics in college. Even after 4 years of college, it was 79%. I mean, it was just unbelievable results. The complete opposite of what you typically see in terms of young people going off to college. Um, so all of this to say that like the idea, what actually makes small group ministry work is not like saying, okay, we're going to do this video Bible study in small groups. Like you might never enter into a true discipleship relationship through doing a program. Like the idea is to use a program as a tool to facilitate discussion, but put the program down and actually make yourself into the program, where they're learning and observing from your way of life. That's the difference between success and failure in discipleship. I told Deacon Steve I wouldn't talk for any more than 10 or 15 minutes, which I don't know where I'm at right now, but I think I've been going for a little bit. I want to spend the majority of time on Q&A because I think we'll learn a lot more from that. So Deacon Steve, I'll give it back over to you to facilitate Q&A,
Sure.
and we'll talk. We'll see where it goes.
Right, great. Thanks, Everett. Thanks for that background. So we really do want to open it up to you who have experienced small groups or have questions about small groups. We really want to try to give you the support that you need to be successful in this. And so that's why we're asking Everett. So it will only work if you ask the questions that you have. So don't be shy. Please just ask the question.
Takes one to get started.
Steve, I think somebody emailed a question in earlier,
Oh.
so maybe if we can ask Amy, I think it was you. Amy Smith.
Yep.
I guess I'll hold the space bar because I was trying to undo it.
Oh no.
Okay. The first question I have for Everett is so the church that I'm going to, the DRE, she actually already ordered Why Disciple 10 times 10 Dive Deep, the video series, so that we could sit down with the mentors that are interested and we could watch these videos together at the church, like in the lounge room or whatever. But I just want to make sure, do you think that is a good training series for small groups? I mean, it seemed like, understanding the needs of teens and what are teenagers, because let's face it, like we all think we know teenagers until we like start this and then we're like, whoa, is that a good program? Because she's bought it for us to watch.
I will say until I get my program filmed, that's the one I would refer everyone to. And even still, I would highly. So I was heavily involved with White Disciple as a developer from about 2013 to 2015. Annie Grandel, who is it's now with Net Ministries, like Augustine Institute sold it to Net Ministries. Annie Grandel has developed it, and the 10 by 10 is an initiative actually of all Christian denominations to try to develop small group ministry among teens. I think it's primarily coming out of what's the name of the institute? The Fuller Institute, but it's like a whole bunch of people, all really good people who understand discipleship in teens like the back of their hand. So if you're going to get training from a group in terms of a program, in terms of a video program, that's a very, very good training program to utilize. So Yeah, it's on my radar to create my own in the near future, but I have no hesitation recommending, for those who are wondering what it is, Y Disciple, that stands for Youth Disciple. So the letter Y, Disciple, and then 10 by 10 is a ecumenical initiative to try to develop, I think, hundreds of small groups for teens over the next 10 years.
Thank you, Amy, for being the brave soul. First one. Who would like to go next?
Hi, my name is Joyce Daly. I'm from Port Allegheny, and we're doing St. Elizabeth and St. Gabriel's. Keep your prayers for Father Dan. He'll probably be seeing Jesus' face faster than we will, unfortunately.
Oh. I mean, that's beautiful, but oh no. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll pray for him. Yes.
Yes, yes. Actually, it's been a very unique way to draw the kids in. I had them write, what do they remember? And they were hysterical. One of the kids, he used to sub for both of the schools in the area, talked about how he had food after lunch in his beard. That cracked him up. He thought that was hysterical. And then he had these hiccups. So they wrote their plans on how to get rid of hiccups. And if you could drink upside down, you got a hiccup cure. But anyhow, so they are very involved in what's happening. I talk about it freely with them. But I am doing the Edge program. There's 4 instructors. Unfortunately, I'm the only one who is on tonight, I believe. I would have to say I've known these kids now because it's a small parish and a small group of kids for several years, and they do have some great stories, but they seem very open when they get together and talk. One of the crafts we did were the Advent wreaths. We had them, we cut out wood, we did candles. The first part of the Edge program, we used my husband and I have a boat, so we brought in all the floatables, all the life preservers. It's very amusing how they all go for the one pink one, and our grandson, who's 2 years old, his life vest. It took a lot to pull them out of them. But anyhow, that was their game. But they had a great time. But how do you get, our director is not as enthusiastic, but we do our best here. We have a lot of nursing homes. We're writing Christmas card letters to them and stuff. But retreats, this parish had not done a whole lot of retreats. We got one girl to go to a retreat, or two girls to go, 2 8th graders to go to retreat, and they had a good time, but they didn't know anybody. The classic junior high thing. I don't know anybody. But I think more retreats and get the information out would be wonderful, because one of my sons went to Toronto to see St. John Paul, and that was great. I mean, it's 1 million people you're looking around, and you suddenly realize, especially out of these small parishes, I think the diocese could do a lot more. And it doesn't have to be humongous ones. A couple parishes pulled together to do this more and more, so they get a chance to see somebody and realize in these small towns that, hey, you're Catholic too, would be very, very helpful. But that's my hope, that maybe, as I said, I don't do the confirmation, but when the kids get together, they don't talk at the confirmation level. It's really hard to get a group of 4 people to talk. But if they're a bigger group.
Yeah, I would say, so your question around small groups and retreats and things might be, so if you're doing the purpose, I know you're doing Edge now, going into purpose into small groups, that might be a way that you could really break into small groups, is creating a retreat where if they're comfortable with each other, going there, they can go deeper, and then carry on that the experience of a retreat through some of your sessions following that retreat, to kind of keep deepening in that retreat. But the small groups that I think that we're looking at is not so much programmatic small groups, but more organic, relational, in terms of what are they experiencing together,
Yes,
like we were talking about service, what was that experience like, those types of things.
Yeah, we have 2 schools here. We have 2 different schools, so when they're on different teams and they see each other, they're already evangelizing because they're in two different schools, and they get a chance to say, hey, I saw you, we wrestled against each other and we played football against each other and that kind of stuff. But I was real quickly, is there a way that the diocese or somebody up here can get like a couple, like between Bradford, Smithport, Port Allegheny, Gailton? I mean, just something can groups get together and say, let's have a retreat this Sunday without having a huge, big expansion of, a big production, but just pull these kids in because everyone's doing the Edge program and, and whatever, the purpose program, and to pull these kids in. Can we have more of these frequently? Because you're sitting around with the same 4 kids. You're not going to open up. What are you going to say? Hi. That's it.
There's nothing stopping you from those parishes surrounding you to get together, to talk, to say, let's just get together and even have a social event. It doesn't have to be specifically retreat to start, but there's nothing stopping any of you from gathering together.
Good news. And thank
Joyce, I would just real quick, because this is what's in your question, what is valuable for everybody to know and hear. The kinds of things that I'm talking about are building organic relationships. There is nothing like a road trip, a retreat weekend, a retreat day to help kind of kick that along and actually help that come along. And even if you only get a handful or a very small number, if it's a good experience, the next time you take a group, it's considerably bigger because those people talk. And what I will say is, like, I would strongly recommend talk to Jillian, because she's your diocesan director of youth ministry, because I know that the diocese just did a confirmation retreat. But in addition to that, there are so many things around the country and probably even in your own neighborhood that are relatively close by that you have to plan well in advance to attend them because they fill up. But I don't plan, well, I shouldn't say that. I do plenty of my own retreats, but I also take advantage of plenty of already existing programs where you just show up and people do everything for you. So talk to Jillian, because I know she's probably very aware of a lot of different programs, and that's true for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I also heard kind of the question of, like, what do you have when you have a group of kids and they're not talking? Because you said maybe I have 4 people and they're not talking, and 4 is just not enough. But Everett, I remember you talking about some techniques and questions and kinds of questions that maybe if you could give a condensed version of that was really helpful for framing my own thought process.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So I do a whole like hour and a half long session on just how to ask good questions to actually get teens talking. But to summarize it in like 2 minutes, I actually really appreciate it when teens don't talk, because they're telling me that I'm asking a bad question. Because if you are engaging with someone's critical thinking in the way that you're asking a question, they cannot help but talk. Like, if you think people are not opinionated, like, young people are more opinionated than anybody. And if you think people don't have opinions, like, get on Twitter, you will see everyone has all it is unsolicited, unwanted, stupid opinions. So the way that you essentially get people to talk is you ask them a question that engages their critical thinking, meaning that, so the simplest way to do it is turn everything into an opinion question. So rather than saying, what did you get out of the speaker's talk? Blank stares. I know I just asked a bad question. Adults will work with a bad question and have a superficial conversation. Young people will tell you, you asked a bad question by just being quiet and silent. And so what did you get out of the speaker's talk? Blank stares. Instead, a better way to say that is to say, hey, the speaker said this one thing. The speaker said, love your enemy, and what, I don't know. Just pull out a quote of what the speaker said. What do you think they meant by that? Now you just turned it into an opinion question. So it's a little bit of an art form. It's a little bit of learning how to ask truly critical thinking questions. The Socratic method goes all the way back to Socrates, but some of it is learning to ask the right questions. Some of it is also just getting them comfortable with one another. Young people will not talk if they don't know the other people. So I spend a fair amount of time in the early going. In fact, I try to advise parents ahead of time when we're meeting in small groups. I say, hey, when your kid comes home, they're going to tell you all we did was fun things. Like we just played together. And I want you to know, like, for the first few weeks, that's all you're going to hear, because we're trying to spend time winning the relationship and getting them comfortable with one another and with us, so that when we start to dive into the faith, they're actually in the habit of talking and feeling comfortable. So sometimes they're telling you, I'm not comfortable enough to share. And sometimes they're telling you, you're asking bad questions. But use that silence as feedback to change what you're doing. Sorry, I'm plugging in my computer as we talk. I'm still listening, but if I'm bending over right now, that's because my computer's about to die.
So in terms of getting started, I know we met with some other people interested in doing mentoring in small groups, and we were trying to throw around ideas like, we need to watch the Y disciple and how do we do this? But it's kind of like we have to talk to the kids, like where do they, we have to get their schedules, and that's all in your book about what are their schedules, where would they like to meet? Would it be a weeknight? Would it be you know, and we had come up with some ideas like, maybe we all have like an invite night, like after confirmation is over, we have this invite, which I think they talk about in the purpose curriculum. And it either could be like, a campfire and then we invite, or, do we talk to the parents first and say we're going to do this bonfire invite, or do we take them to Peak and Peak, like the ski resort, and go tubing, and when we all sit by the fireplace, we talk about inviting to small groups and how does that sound, or like, how would you start the inviting to small groups?
I think all of those are great ideas. There's no exact recipe. Um, I talk about in my book a unique method of trying to engage parents and getting parents involved in the idea of forming small groups. I think if you have leaders that have been coming up through the Edge and Purpose program and maybe have built a bond with some particular teens, it might be really natural for them to just say, "Hey, when confirmation's over, we're going to continue and meet up with us in small group." That can work really well if the relationship's already there. But if you're introducing new mentors to new teens, I think first off, uh, I I don't know why more parishes don't have a hey, next week you just got confirmed. Next week, here's what we're doing activity, meaning like get together and celebrate. Uh, it's a fantastic opportunity to find out the kids that have the intention of remaining engaged and to personally invite them at the end of one of those nights, like you talked about, a bonfire, a ski thing would be phenomenal, like you mentioned, or whatever it was, the mountain thing. All of those are certainly draws, but the biggest thing that you need to communicate throughout the process to both parents and teens is what comes next. The sacrament of confirmation is a beginning. It's an initiation. It's an initiation into the mission of the church. And very frequently, what comes next is we say, "Go out and change the world." And it's like, well, that's not real helpful. Like, you got to tell them how and why, and kind of what, if the intention is lifelong formation and the intention is to continue to offer them ministry, then there should be a communication throughout the process of, and here's what comes next, to both the parents and to the young people. And again, like we use the language when I was working with the Dawson team, before the oil is dry on their forehead, they should know and have an invite to the next thing.
And Everett, when you were working with us, especially at the trainings over the summer, you provided some worksheets to help get started with this invitation piece. So I'm going to put the link to them. They're on a Padlet that supports all the aspects of the rollout on there. So you'll find this under like transition from ninth grade, I think is the heading. There's like a whole bunch of like different columns. So just scroll over until you find transition, and it'll talk about how to start doing those invitations. And Amy, you did an awesome job naming all kinds of different ways. And Everett has like an overview sheet, and then he has like an in-depth, like step-by-step of how you would do each of those pieces with ideas. So you already have ideas, but that might help engender more or help you plan out whatever those ideas are. And also when you get into, Everett was talking about winning the relationship and then moving into kind of the more meatier faith conversations. Under the 10th grade column, it has some kind of structured worksheets to help you think about different ways to engage in discipleship as we go through. So Everett, if you want to add anything, those are all your worksheets. You know how they work.
I'll say as we're talking about things, I'm adding some things to the chat box as well. Like I put up my website, andrew-ministries.com, where I have like free blogs and you can sign up for newsletters and different things where it gives just ongoing advice on engaging young people. So I know Why Disciples, I'll put Why Disciple up there as well, because it was mentioned, and that's a really good resource as well. Um, but yeah, there is a lot of help out there nowadays and I know I've been working with your diocesan team. The team is intending on helping as well to get you headed in this direction. The purpose of this webinar is really to have the conversation of if you're not already thinking about what comes to, I know we've been executing purpose and edge, and there's a lot of work that goes into getting those programs running and going well. But it's like, okay, we also need to be thinking ahead to high school ministry and what that looks like post confirmation. Small groups is by and large the most successful foundational piece of youth ministry.
I need some advice. This is my first year being a catechist, and I'm helping our deacon with purpose. And we have the opposite problem of Joyce. We have 12 people in Union City at St. Teresa's on Sunday, and then there's 6 people at St. Thomas on Wednesdays in Corey. I just do the help with the kids in Union City. So the 12 kids, it's almost, there's a couple that take over and are very opinionated and will kind of set the tone, and then the other ones just don't engage, don't speak up. And we're doing the purpose program, we're trying to do it right through each lesson, but it's almost like something's missing, and I think I like what you said, and I went to the summer program. They're not witnessing it, and I had said, we have our retired priest. I asked him this past Sunday at church, I said, would you come in and maybe have a Q&A? Because they know him. We have a newer priest, and they're very familiar with our retired priest. I said, would you come in and do a Q&A like with the kids? I mean, and maybe, they would open up to you, because they keep saying, we want to know, the religion, like why Catholic, like why are we Catholic? And I just think that there's so many gaps. And two, like I'm looking forward. That's why I came back to this webinar tonight, because I'm looking forward to, that's really where my heart is, small groups. When I heard you talk, like that's really what I would like to do. And I'm just afraid we're going to get to the end and they're not going to have witness. So they're gonna be like, well, why would I go to the next step? Any advice? Like, should we be now like talking to some parishioners that we think, are walking in the faith, and say, hey, let's set up and I feel like, because the schedule's already out there, and we're told that we're not allowed to meet in homes, we're not allowed to meet in coffee shops, we have to meet at the church, we have to meet at the center, and I'm like, why can't we somehow like do, like you said, like on a Thursday night, like set up where almost like the first small group session now in purpose, while we have these kids here, and kind of get them together and bond with these people that are showing their faith, that are witnessing their faith, that maybe they can bond like at the coffee shop or something, just some kind of like a mixer of some sort, like I don't know, but I just need some advice, because I'm told we're not allowed to do that. We have to be at the church, and it's like I'm just so afraid we're going to get to the end and we're losing them. We're going to lose them all, because it's so big, the group's so big, and they don't engage, and they just sit there and let the other two take over. And
Shelley, not to interrupt, but I guess I did interrupt. Mary's going to give you the updated policy on where and how you can meet in small groups, but also just to say that I don't know if I heard you correctly, but are all 12 of are you in just one group?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that could be a problem in itself. That's why they're not talking. If the group is too large, so you really, if you
12 is too large.
Yeah, you would need at least 2 groups and possibly 3 groups with that many. So you need some more core team. And you're absolutely right that when you're doing purpose, you should already be looking at how am I going to transition these kids? Because confirmation for some of you is in February, March. So what are you going to do from March until May? You want to make sure that there's something for those kids, and that's where you introduce the small groups. So yes, definitely, you should already be thinking of small groups and looking at parishioners who could bring in that experience of faith. How are they living the faith and really connect with those students? We should be looking at our parishioners all the time and not being afraid to approach them to say, hey, I noticed this in you and I think you would be phenomenal at this. That's how you're going to get your leaders. It's not going to be by putting a bulletin announcement in there. We know that. So if you see people, yes, don't hesitate to go up and ask them. But Mary, sorry, Mary, I know Mary wants to tell you about the updated policy.
Yeah, Shelley, we need to talk this week, but also, if you guys are having trouble like this and you're running into some things that are becoming issues for us, you need to call us. We are more than happy to come out and work with you, talk to you, work through the problems to help you get going. But if we could talk this week, I can get you the policy and we can go over a few things too.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Shelley, to answer your question, because I think this will be valuable for everybody to hear. If it sounds intimidating to try to say, okay, they need to see the faith lived. If you're like, well, what does that look like? How do you do that? The way that you do that is that they need to actually have a relationship with you and not the program. And this is why I said earlier, I said there comes a point where you actually have to be willing to put the program down. And I talked about winning the relationship, and I said don't be afraid to have fun and just like play with them. The most important thing, honestly, is that you recognize that you are the program. And so if you're living your Catholic faith, G.K. Chesterton had this great quote. I wish I could find it somewhere, but he said, Christians stand out to the world. He says, if a Christian is living their faith, they will even climb a tree differently than the rest of the world. Like it isn't actually that complicated to show them the faith, because what is ultimately going to attach them to the faith, like what I hear time and time again from young people who are practicing their faith, is when I ask them, like, what is it that brought you to faith? They will frequently talk about a relationship with a person and not necessarily a program that they did. So the program's great because it gives structure. It gives maybe a topic. It gives people like confidence to be able to. But then there's also the step that you go further is like I love giving people a program, and then I say, now take the program and throw it out. Like use the structure. That's great. Use the topic, etc. But do not be afraid to put it down so that they can actually have a relationship with you. And that is the key. Like if it were up to me, I would tell you, hey, a couple of times in the next few weeks, grab a card game with your 12 and just play the card game. And in fact, it'd be better if it's not a religious card game, because those 10 that are not talking to the 2 that are, like those 10 will start talking through competition, through like some sort of like less intimidating topic. One of my goals when I start a small group is to get everybody talking. And I usually do that by starting a Q&A or some sort of question that has nothing to do with faith. And I'll actually call out to people and be like, what do you think? What do you think, Carl? What do you think, Janie? You know, and use some sort of just simple thing that can get everybody talking. What do you think of the big Steelers game this past week? You know?
Oh no.
Well, I mean, I don't care. I couldn't possibly care less about the Steelers. I live in Denver, but you know, it's the goal is to get them all talking, you know, and comfortable and engaged.
Yeah, because we have an event this Sunday night. We're not having class Sunday. We have it our life night, you know, Sunday night, and you know, I'm coming up with the games and stuff, and it's just like I don't want to do too much because I just want to leave space. You know, we're having food because I remember you said you got to feed them. You know, and they, you know, I just want them to be able, because we are bringing both St. Thomas and St. Teresa's together. So there's going to be kids that, I mean, they don't know each other. So, you know, I want them, I want space for them to be able to talk. And then eventually, like, I like that idea, like you said, like reach out to the other area diocese churches, because my daughter was going to a Protestant faith, you know, youth group, and they would have like large get-togethers with all the area churches. And she, you know, she's like, I I feel like I'm drowning. Like, what's they only know St. Teresa's kids, you know, she's like, I want to meet other Catholics, you know, so that's a great idea.
I have just something that happened years ago. One of our parishioners at St. Gabriel's was running the addiction program, Alcoholics Anonymous and the Narcon. And I had he and his wife come and talk. It was so, so powerful and so real, their testimony. And it was, I can remember him saying he was in an institution watching people bang their heads against the wall. He was 21 years old. And he said, you know what? Guess my plan's not working for my life. God, what's your plan? I mean, something as simple as that. I mean, looking for people who are in those kind of recovery programs, because they have some really gut felt experiences. And one of the leaders was a paramedic, and she talked about watching people die, those who had faith and those who did not. I mean, these kids are not soft. I think we keep treating them like they're little, their world is rough and tough, and it's stuff that we have no idea what they're being exposed to. I think we can, hit them with rough, tough stuff, and they'll get it.
Mm-hmm. The real life, like you said, not a program, not out of, I'm so like, oh my gosh, we got to get all this information into them, instead of just putting the program down and being real.
Yeah, so no, you'd be surprised at how much more program you can get into them when they're open and receptive, because you've taken the time to build a relationship. Like they'll start to ask you questions and tell you where their gaps are. But they will only do that once they trust you in terms of the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
A whole different, I think we keep thinking of this a little bit like education. And that was the change for me too, right? Like you think about content you're trying to pass on, but you're not passing on a content, you're passing on a person. So I used to think like I want them to know these things, but in any relationship, like I know more about my husband now than I knew when we were first dating. But why do I know? Because I love him. And the more things I learn, the more I learn to love him better and love the people he loves. So it's that all of these things are in the context of love. And that's what the program is trying to do. It's trying to help us learn, like I would talk to my mother-in-law and learn about my husband, but they're kind of that third person who's telling us about. So that's where it can come along as a support. But I think it's an insightful thing for you to realize that, like, hey, I'm trying to get content into them. Maybe the switch is they're going to pick up content by being in relationship.
Right.
I just want to point out, like, Jesus's parable of the sower and the seeds and the different kinds of soils. And he talks about spreading the seed, and the seed being the message, like the teaching, the message. And he says, like, if the soil's not good soil, like the weeds choke it out, it falls upon stony ground, etc. And the point that he's making there is that, like, the quality of the seed is not how you fix that problem, or spreading more seed is not how you fix that problem. It's clear in the parable, tilling the soil and creating good soil is how you like are successful in terms of passing on the faith, in terms of making things grow. So he's saying you need to pay more attention, honestly, to the people who are receiving the message than to like creating like just better and more seed. It's the soil, it's the people receiving the message that is the difference between success and failure.
Yep.
You're muted, Amy.
I don't know.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. How often should we do the small groups? Because when we were talking about it with other people, they were like, well, maybe we start off once a month. And then how do we inspire like some of the older parishioners that like want to volunteer? They say things like, I'm kind of old. I don't know how much they're gonna want to, hang out with me. And I'm like, oh no, don't be like that. Like it shouldn't matter. But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I will say, anytime I get that response from somebody of an older generation, I remind them that John Paul II was the greatest youth minister that this world has ever seen, and he was an 80-some-year-old Polish man with Parkinson's disease, theologian and philosopher. Like there is a tremendous need for young people are actually craving older generations pouring into them. Like we think that they're wanting to pull away. Like they will. I have seen so many people from older generations be phenomenal youth ministers. It's less about, hey, I don't know if they're going to want to hang out with me. No, they don't. Like who wants to? If you're 16, you don't want to play Fortnite with a 84-year-old. Like, but that's the point. They've got 16-year-olds to play Fortnite with. They don't have an 84-year-old to learn life from. And that what those people bring to the table is not going to be another teenager friend for them to hang out with. What they bring is years and years of wisdom and guidance. Um, and honestly, like young people will like I just will tell you real quick. Like I had a meeting with a Presbyterial council in a diocese and a bunch of older priests in the Presbyterial council, and they said something to the effect of like they were asking me, and I did like a 10-20 minute spiel on young people and what we need to be doing and to make ministry effective. And I was like, is there any questions? And one of the older priests said, yeah, how do you talk to teenagers? And all the other priests were like, yeah, like ask. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's where we're at. I was like, the same way you talk to anybody else. They're like, yeah, but they talk in a lingo and different. I was like, yeah, if you see them looking at TikTok on your phone, ask them to show you what it is they're looking at and teach them a little about. They will be so drawn to that. In terms of an older person saying, show me that. Like, I want to know about that. And they'll tell you all about their world. That's how you start to make inroads in is you actually take an active interest in them and their likes and their interests. You don't need to know. I don't know most of the things that are popular in youth culture these days, and I work with young people. You don't need to know it. They'll teach you it. Anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but there's a lot to be said. Um, what I would say to those older generations, that I would say to them, we need you, like, and the young people need you. How often should you be meeting? My ideal is weekly when you're trying to form the relationships. Um, every other week can work. I've had groups that meet monthly. Consistency is really important when you're trying to build friendships and relationships. There's a great comment in there by Kate as well. Think about how many people talk about.
Yep, Diane had a question.
Yeah, I'm a part. My full name's Diane Johnson. Diane just comes up. I'm from the Epiphany of the Lord Church here in Meadville, Pennsylvania. I have been in and running a small group for adults for 22 years because we started when we were at St. Bridget. And I wasn't going to come to this workshop tonight because it was for youth. I thought it was for the youth. But you've just given me an idea, which I think would be really good. We have some really fine adult leaders, people who have been, as I have been, in small faith programs for an extended period of time. And this would be a perfect opportunity. We have our Amy Mosbacher. I see there's an Amy Mosbacher here. Our Amy Mosbacher is our adult formation leader. She's fabulous. And she's the one that brought this program to our attention at a facilitator meeting. And I think there's room for, because when you are in adult small groups, you eventually, through that growth that you attain through the grace of God, should be doing things in your parish or giving that gift to other people. And this would be a perfect way to do it. So thank you. That's all. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
And that would be a huge gift.
Yeah.
That would be a huge gift to whoever's in charge of young people in your parish. If you said, hey, I've got adults who've been participating in small groups who get this, and they're interested in working with some of the young people, that would be an enormous gift for whoever's in charge at your parish.
So
Is
it's
there anyone on here that is doing small groups right now?
say that again, Shelley.
Is there anyone on here that is currently doing small groups right now for youth?
Apparently everybody here is learning about small groups.
Okay.
So
we are doing small group at St. Anthony's in Cambridge. We only have small groups. Our whole catechism group is 16 children. So
okay.
Our confirmation class is one. Our we actually have 5th through 8th grade, and we have 5. That's our big group. So that tells you. And we have been working with them already. We went bowling last week. So you don't have to actually stay in your church. You can take them someplace. We actually talked to the people where we were bowling at before we started bowling. We went in and talked to them, and we actually had our class, but we also had the younger kids because we didn't think it was fair just to take the one class. So we invited all of the kids, and they had a blast. And the priest said, well, we'll pay for this one because it was $65 a lane for 2 hours, and they also provided pizza and drink. So the kids not only ate, they had a blast, and they all went out of there fully blessed.
That's great.
That's a perfect example of winning the relationship, the kinds of things that you can do.
Nice.
Okay, I don't want to, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. We said it would run an hour, and we're right just about in an hour. So any final questions for Everett? Everett, I also want to make sure before you go to, I don't want to offer this without your permission, but you would be available for anybody to send you an email with a question that came to them after this webinar?
Yes, and in fact, I just put my website back in the chat room area, which you can contact me through the contact form of the website.
Yeah, great.
Or if you need my contact information in terms of direct contact information, Deacon Steve has it. So
yep. Thanks, Everett.
Yep.
I do have a question if we have time for one or two more. I'm Kathy Whitaker, and I'm here with my husband, Dan, and also Greg Cummings. Greg's sitting next to us. He's not on camera right now. So we're at Beloved Disciple Parish in Grove City. Greg and I are both new as the faith formation leaders as of the beginning of this academic year. And we dove into both Edge and Purpose both this year. So getting those up and running is obviously pretty challenging. We have good core teams. So I have kind of a two-part question. We probably haven't done enough of small group to, get a good sense of those, but would you suggest introducing maybe mentors for small group into like some of our confirmation activities this year? And we know we want to build relationships with the core team. That's what we're trying to do with the small groups right now. But would that be reasonable to bring people in, even if they're just maybe in and out as possible mentors down the road? That's
yes,
one.
You're going to have go ahead.
I guess kind of part two is parents of students and involvement, because I see parents being sold on the idea of small groups after confirmation as being kind of key as well.
Yes, a couple of things to that, just real quick. Any way that you can help to foster relationships between would-be mentors and teens ahead of confirmation or before confirmation, it should absolutely would be a good idea. An invitation from someone that they know and have met and have interacted with is going to be much better received than an invitation from a total stranger. So yeah, if you can find ways to integrate would-be mentors into the program, so that they can start to get to know the teens and the teens can get to know them, that's ideal. The second is that, yes, I would be absolutely communicating to the parents ahead of time. This is what's coming. whether it's through a parent meeting or through some sort of natural opportunity to get in front of the parents. A lot of times, if I have, for example, a confirmation retreat, um, prior to the retreat, we have the parents come to a meeting, uh, and we find some excuse to get them there. But usually, come for wine and cheese. We'll tell you what's coming. Up in youth ministry, hey, at the confirmation retreat, we want you to write letters ahead of time to affirm them. And here, let me tell you what we're doing after confirmation. Really, that's my goal, is to just get a captive audience to give them an idea of, like, there's going to be something after this. You want to get parents on board with this process, even if it's just a couple of, you don't necessarily have to say, we're going to get every parent on board. That's a lot of work. But if it's a couple of key parents who can get on board with this idea of small groups, and they can start to work to get some of the other parents on board, that tends to be a win-win in terms of valuing your time and getting the word out among parents.
Thank you.
We're 3 minutes over, as you can see, so I'll hand it back to you.
All right, Everett. Well worth it. All right, I want to thank you all for taking the time to join here. Again, Mary said it before, but I'm going to reiterate it. If you have any questions that you would like help with, please don't hesitate to contact any one of us on the Faith Formation team. If you want us to come visit, we can certainly do that as well. We really want to support. That's the whole thing, is if we don't support you, it's not going to be a success. And we want our young people to have an encounter with Christ and to stay connected to the faith. That is our goal, to have an encounter with Christ and stay connected to the faith, and be in relationship. We know, we've heard the statistics over and over again, those who have 5 adult relationships in their lives are much more likely to stay engaged than those who don't have those 5 adults in their life. So again, thank you for all the work that you're doing. We know that it's a heavy lift. So we're here praying with you and for you. And again, don't hesitate to use us as resources. And Everett is also always available.
Until I'm dead, then I'm not. Take advantage of it now.
Yeah, but we'll read your books, so you'll still be available.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. If it stays in print that long.
There you go. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Jillian had texted me that Jason isn't home and one of the kids had an issue that needed to be handled right away. The recording is still going on the laptop. So when the Zoom ends, it will cut off at the end and we can edit it.